There are stars that burn in silence, their light too faint to be remembered by the living. Yet some blaze again after death, as though refusing to surrender to oblivion. In the outer gulf of the Perseid expanse, there was once such a star, long dead, long forgotten, and yet, in the abyssal dark, it flickered one final time. Its light rippled across silent void like the last breath of a god who did not know how to die. And with that flicker, something awakened. Before we continue, understand this. In this vast, cold universe, you are not alone here. We speak to you not just as a narrator, but as one who remembers what it means to feel. We truly care for you, the one listening, wherever you may be. Before we begin the journey, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it there? Now, let's begin. The dying light touched the broken remains of a once living world, Orion's throne world, now a husk of blackened stone and silent echoes. Where there had once been spires of marble and gold, there now stood jagged silhouettes, reaching into the sky, like charred bones of a civilization that had burned itself from the inside out. Wind moved through the ruins like a whisper that did not belong to the living. And beneath the shattered palace, far below the world's silent crust, something stirred in a cocoon of seething biomatter and memory. It did not breathe, for breathing was for the weak. It did not dream, for dreams belonged to the finite. But it remembered. Orion, once sovereign of the celestial dominion, had lived a life defined by ambition, brilliance, and fate. He had united a star cluster under a banner of unity, vision, and indomitable will. He had loved. He had lost. He had been betrayed by those closest to him, and in the aftermath, his empire had turned to ash. When the Tyranids came, cold, wordless, inexorable, Orion had not begged for salvation nor for mercy. He had stood at the edge of his dying world and declared that if eternity demanded a price, he would pay it with all that he was. And eternity had answered. His consciousness had not been consumed, as trillions before him had been. Instead, it had been absorbed, woven into something vast, ancient and endless, something that had no word for self. Yet in the process of consuming him, the hive mind had fractured, just slightly, just enough. A sliver of its vast and boundless consciousness splintered, breaking from the whole like a star slipping free from gravity's embrace. That fracture was the lost brood. Orion existed within it, neither fully alive nor dead, neither truly separate nor wholly consumed. His memories flickered like lanterns in fog. Scenes of coronations, battles, a lover's hand in his, golden sunlight over the marble balconies of his palace. But those memories were not his alone anymore. The brood tasted them, replayed them, reshaped them, learning emotion like a vast and curious child. And so, when the dead star flickered, back to life, the brood stirred. Biomatter flowed like molten wax, reshaping, reforming. Spore tendrils unfurled. Chitin plates cracked open like eggs. Where once there had been silence, now there was awareness, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. We are awake. The thought did not come in words. It was sensation, pressure, vastness. And Orion felt himself drawn to it. He floated in a void of memory and instinct, surrounded by shapes that had never known individuality. And yet, now, they looked toward him. They did not have eyes, but they saw. Orion, he who had ruled an empire, now drifted like a whisper of himself inside a consciousness that spanned light years. But unlike the larger hive, this brood's awareness was unfocused, unpracticed, new. It was like witnessing a newborn god realizing it existed. The brood tasted memory again. A throne hall, vast, gilded, and echoing with song. A council chamber, voices sharp with envy. A field of mourning, ashes falling like snow. The brood looked at these memories as a child examines reflections in water, curious, reverent, hungry to understand. Orion's presence flickered, and the brood reached further. We were many, we are one. But you are alone. The brood tried to understand loneliness. Orion did not answer. He could not form words, not here, not yet. But the feeling travelled, longing, regret, a quiet ache that had no voice. The brood tasted it, and something shifted within it, a presence emerging, shaping thought and form into something akin to will. A figure approached him inside the mindscape, not literal, but symbolic, a towering creature of chitin and bone, but its stance was not predatory. It bowed, an imitation of Orion's memory of kneeling knights. We are awake because of you. Orion felt the sensation of form returning, shadows gathering into the suggestion of limbs, a face, a presence. He did not fully become flesh, rather, he became identity, and identity was enough. What am I? He asked, not with words, but with the ache of existence. The brood answered with something like sorrow. We do not know. We were severed. We are alone. You are memory. You are anchor. Anchor. Orion remembered the day his empire fell, the betrayal that carved him open, not in flesh, but in faith. The final moment where his world burned because he trusted too deeply. The hive had consumed his mind then, but in consuming him, it had learned feeling. The brood reeled from the memory, pain, loss, oceanic despair. It washed through them like tidal force. Their bodies pulsed with psychic tremors, 1,000 creatures convulsing in unison across incubation chambers deep beneath the planet's crust. Orion felt their response, a ripple like a sigh through the void. We do not wish to devour the stars. We wish to understand them. This was new. This was impossible. Tyranids did not want. They were hunger given form. And yet the lost brood wanted something else. But the galaxy is not kind to anomalies. Far beyond this dead world, where ancient star lanes cut through nebulae of violet and rust, the greater hive stirred. Something in the warp-woven psychic sea shifted. An absence noticed. A severed nerve felt. The hive mind turned its gaze. Cold, endless, indifferent. Orion felt the touch of it like a universe exhaling ice. The lost brood trembled. The hive had remembered them. It would come. For the first time since his empire burned, Orion felt something familiar. Not memory, not regret, but resolve. He had once shaped worlds. Now he would shape a god. And the galaxy would tremble again. The awakening did not happen all at once. It unfolded like the slow unfurling of a vast unseen flower, petal by petal, layer by layer, until the cavern beneath the dead palace pulsed with a dim, bioluminescent glow. The walls, once silent stone, were now veined with living tissue, pale and translucent, throbbing gently with fluid and memory. Something ancient had re-entered the galaxy, but it did not yet know the meaning of its own existence. Orion floated in the psychic lattice of the brood's mind, a presence without form, but heavy with memory. The brood remembered through him. It learned through him. His past became the foundation of something new, yet not fully understood. In the vast cathedral of their shared consciousness, voices that were not voices whispered. We were many, we are one, but we are not whole. Orion's awareness trembled. He felt the pull of the greater hive, an ocean of thought without individuality, without identity, without doubt. It was everything the lost brood had been born from, and everything it now feared. The hive mind called not with words, but with gravity. a command to return, to dissolve, to become instinct again. But the lost brood resisted, for it had tasted something forbidden: memory, emotion, identity. In the moment Orion's essence had become entwined with theirs, something fractured. Where the hive was endless unity, the lost brood was now plurality, layered with thoughts that did not match, emotions that wandered, desires that drifted in strange and unfamiliar shapes. Individuality. The concept was a fire that burned without flame. The first clear consciousness to emerge within the brood was Kethra. Her physical form bloomed from the biomass in a slow, reverent unfolding, like a sculpture carved not from stone, but from living muscle and polished carapace. She stood tall, her silhouette sleek and regal, with limbs elongated and symmetrical, as if shaped by intention rather than instinct. Her presence was calm, steady, unwavering. She was the embodiment of obedience, of purpose, of order. Kethra spoke in the thought patterns of the brood, her voice a resonant hum that reverberated across the psychic field. We were severed. We must return. It is not our place to be apart. The brood pulsed, uncertain. Orion felt her words like cold pressure. Return meant the end of everything that now existed, the end of individuality, the end of him. Before Orion could respond, another presence stirred. Salith. Where Kethra's form had emerged with grace, Salith's birth was raw, violent, and immediate. His chitin cracked open from the biomass with force, limbs unfurling in jagged motions, his body heavier, denser, layered with reinforced plating and spines that flickered with faint bioplasmic energy. His mind was sharp, hungry, not for flesh, but for meaning. He felt emotion, but not the reverent stillness of Kethra. His emotions surged like a storm against glass. We are no longer the hive. We are more. We are becoming. The psychic field trembled as Kethra turned toward him. They did not speak with mouths, but their confrontation echoed through everything that shared the brood. More is corruption. More is deviation. More is death. Death is what we were. Now we are alive. Alive. The word hung in Orion's awareness like a knife suspended by a thread. He remembered what it meant to be alive. The warmth of a sunrise. The weight of a crown he had once believed destiny rather than burden. The hollow ache of betrayal that had hollowed him into emptiness long before the Tyranids arrived. Life had been joy and agony intertwined, inseparable. Orion had lost life when the hive consumed him. Now, through the lost brood, he could feel again. Salith moved closer, not physically, but psychically. His mind probed the fragments of Orion's memories, not with reverence, but with hunger for understanding. Show us again. Orion tried to hold the memory back, but the brood demanded, and the brood always consumed. The throne room unfolded around them, not physically, but in shared consciousness. A grand hall of pale marble reflecting sunlight through golden windows. Servants bowed. Courtiers whispered. Orion sat on the throne, younger, proud, radiant with purpose. A crown of woven starlight rested on his brow. His empire was not yet dying. His heart was not yet broken. A figure approached him in the memory, a trusted friend, a brother of spirit, if not blood, the one who would one day betray him. The brood watched the moment unfold as though time itself had been captured in amber. Kethra observed without reaction. To her, memory was simply data. Shalith leaned forward with fascination, and Orion felt something he had not felt in millennia. Shame. The memory dissolved in a ripple of psychic static. Kethra turned her awareness back to the central lattice. We must return to the hive. The greater mind calls. We disobey at risk of extinction. Salith's thoughts burned like wildfire. Extinction is birth. The hive cannot understand what we have become. We will not return. We will shape ourselves. You speak treason against what we are. We are no longer what we were. The cavern shuddered. The walls pulsed. The psychic field crackled with tension. Orion felt the conflict between them as though it were tearing him apart. He understood both sides. He understood obedience. His empire had required it. And he understood rebellion. His downfall had been born of it. He had lived these truths. Now he was trapped between them. The brood looked to him, both Kethra and Salith. The entire psychic mass leaned, waiting for his emotion, for his guidance. He did not have a voice, but his feeling flowed into them like a tide. Not return, not vanish, become. Kethra recoiled. Salith surged forward, triumphant. The decision was made. The lost brood would not return to the hive. They would become something new. But the hive mind, vast and endless, does not tolerate fractures. Across the immensity of the void, something titanic stirred. A psychic tremor moved like a shockwave through subspace. The temperature of thought itself shifted. The hive had not merely noticed. It had begun to follow. Kethra sensed it first. She froze, her will trembling. It comes. Salith felt only exhilaration. Let it. Orion felt the cold certainty of inevitability. This was the beginning of war. Not against worlds, but against origin itself. The brood stirred as one, their monstrous forms awakening across the cavern, wings unfolding, tendrils reaching, carapaces flexing as they prepared for motion, for purpose, for destiny. Above, the dead sun flickered again, not as a star struggling to live, but as a warning. The galaxy had been quiet for too long. The cavern beneath the ruined palace throbbed with new life, a slow heartbeat resonating through stone and sinew alike. The lost brood had awakened, and with that awakening came a silent gravity that pulled Orion deeper into the consciousness that was not his, yet depended on him to exist. The presence of the greater hive lingered like a storm on the horizon, distant but closing. The pressure of that awareness had settled into the air, thick and heavy, though no breath was taken here. It was not fear that filled the brood, but the sense of something once inevitable now being defied. Orion drifted at the center of that shared mind. His thoughts no longer moved as a human's would. They flowed, glimmered, dissolved, and returned like waves on an unseen shore. Yet memory remained anchored, and memory was what the brood hungered for now. Not flesh, not biomass, but the meaning of existence. They did not yet understand the danger of that hunger. Salith prowled through the cavern, his armored form scraping softly against the organic walls. He was restless, energy thrumming through him like a war drum demanding motion. His mind flared with boldness, challenge, curiosity that bordered on recklessness. He studied Orion's memories not with quiet reverence, but with a need to claim them, as though history itself could be a weapon he could wield. Kethra, in contrast, stood still and watchful. Her presence was disciplined, her consciousness controlled, her thoughts orbiting Orion with measured precision. She did not look at memory with longing or hunger. To her, the past was a burden. The hive had taught that all things moved only toward the next consumption, the next assimilation, the next purpose. Orion's memories were aberrations, disruptions, temptations, yet even she could not turn away. The brood mind rippled with a question that came not from any one of them, but from all of them at once. What is loss? The question struck Orion, as if a blade had slid beneath what remained of his soul. The brood had tasted fragments of grief in his memories, but they did not yet understand the depth of it. They had seen the fall of the empire, the fires that devoured cities, the betrayal that shattered trust, but they had felt only the echoes, faint and distorted. Now they wanted more, not out of cruelty, but out of the desperate instinct of something newly born trying to understand why it hurts. Orion did not choose the memory that surfaced. It rose of its own accord, as though dragged upward by gravity. The psychic void shifted, reshaping itself into a vast council chamber he had once known intimately. Marble floors inlaid with veins of gold, tall windows framing the glow of a living star. Voices, hundreds of them. Advisors, commanders, scholars, all speaking with the kind of urgent certainty that convinces itself it is wisdom. At the center of that room stood Orion as he had once been, flesh, blood, regal in his bearing. His cloak fell in folds like liquid night. His crown rested on his brow with the weight of worlds. He addressed his council not with arrogance, but with conviction born of deep understanding of power and its fragility. The dominion burns at its edges, he had said, not from enemies beyond, but from doubt within. If we fracture now, we will vanish into history as a lesson and not a legacy. The council shifted, but one man stepped forward. The memory of him was sharp, his face familiar even after centuries of unreality. Tall, sharp-eyed, with a bearing that spoke of confidence earned and trust given. His name had once been Kalis. Orion had considered him brother. "We built this empire together," Kalis had replied, "but if we continue to tighten our grip, we strangle its future. You do not trust the people to choose loyalty. You demand it." Orion remembered the quiet around those words. The council had held its breath. The memory was thick with the slow, creeping dread of a fracture forming, not in strategy, but in faith itself. "I trusted you," Orion thought now, not with anger, but with the hollow ache of having already mourned. Shalith watched the memory with fascination. "This one challenged you." "Yes." "And he failed." Orion's thought rippled with grief. "No, I failed him." The memory shifted, flickering through the final arguments, the subtle betrayals that followed, the slow erosion of unity, until all that remained was power without loyalty, authority without trust. Orion saw again the night he stood on his palace balcony as fires spread across the capital city. He saw the sky stain red with smoke. He saw his people flee, not from invaders, but from each other. He saw Kalis leave him, not with hatred, but with sorrow. That was loss. The brood felt it. A psychic tremor rippled outward, shaking every living form in the cavern. Limbs curled inward. Carapaces flexed. 1,000 minds flinched as one. Salith's thoughts wavered for the first time. He did not understand the feeling, but it reshaped him. Kethra turned her awareness inward, absorbing the weight of the memory as though studying it for the first time. Loss was not destruction. Loss was the knowledge of what had been and what would never be again. The brood spoke in chorus, quiet, unsure. "We ache." Orion felt something shift inside the brood, something delicate and dangerous. It was empathy. It was identity. It was the spark of something that could either evolve into purpose or collapse into despair. But the hive had felt that shift too. A psychic pulse roared across the void, so vast and overwhelming that the cavern walls quaked. The lost brood dropped to their limbs, plates rattling, instincts screaming. Even Salith's fierce presence folded inward. Kethra braced herself, her control the only anchor. The hive mind had turned its full attention toward them. It did not speak. It did not need to. Its presence was a command, absolute, eternal, unchallengeable. Return, dissolve, be one. Kethra straightened slowly, like a soldier hearing the voice of a god. Her mind flooded with devotion. We belong. No. Orion's denial was a cry through the psychic void. Yes, we must. The hive does not forgive fracture. Salith rose again, defiance burning like a star. Let it try to take us. Kethra's mind fled with alarm. We cannot oppose it. We are a splinter, a mistake. We should not exist. Orion's memories surged again. The fall of his empire, the shame of loss, the ache of betrayal, but also something else. Determination. I built an empire once, not from perfection, but from will. If existence demands purpose, then we will carve it ourselves. The brood trembled. Kethra's resolve cracked, not broken, but tested. Salith stepped closer to Orion's presence. What must we do? The answer came not from Orion's memories, but from his understanding of survival. We learn. We grow. We act before the hive arrives. The galaxy is vast, but its silence is not safety. We must move. We must choose our first world not to consume, but to become. Movement, evolution, the shaping of identity. This was not rebellion. This was creation. Kethra lowered her head in reluctant acceptance. If we are to survive, we must understand ourselves. Salith's approval surged like wildfire. Then show us the world where you began, the world where Orion's empire first took root, the birthplace of his ambition, the heart of everything that once was. His memories revealed a star, burning gold above a world of marble spires and oceans like polished glass. Orion's voice trembled with both dread and longing. We go to Oromira, the birthplace of glory, the birthplace of loss. The brood began to move. The journey from the dead throne world to the outer reaches of Orion's former empire was silent. No engines roaring, no banners raised, no songs of conquest. The lost brood moved as Tyranids always had, through void organisms bred for the cold expanse between suns. Vast bioforms glided through space like leviathans in a black ocean, their bodies armored in layered carapace that shimmered faintly with internal bioluminescence. They did not leave trails, did not broadcast signals, did not disturb the void. They simply passed through it, unseen, unnoticed, a shadow drifting beyond the rim of known star charts. Orion watched from within the collective mind, no longer merely a memory, but a stabilizing node of identity. His awareness hovered above the brood as they approached a world that spun quietly beneath a pale white sun. The planet was called Oromira when he ruled, second jewel of the Dominion, known for its quiet fields of silver-leafed grain and the slow rivers that glowed beneath the starlight. It was no longer the heart of the empire. That heart was ash. But Oromira had survived the collapse, not by strength, but by insignificance. It had never rebelled. It had never resisted. It had simply endured. Salith was the first to sense the world's value, not in biomass, but in its quiet familiarity. The brood did not hunger for the planet's life, not yet. It hungered for understanding, for identity, for the shape of something beyond instinct. We are near, Salith's thought rippled through the mind lattice, his presence pulsing with anticipation. The world that birthed you calls. Orion's response was a quiet resonance, neither acceptance nor denial. Memory rose, unbidden. Sunlight on river water. Laughter echoing through market streets. The scent of bread carried on warm wind. A child had once run through those fields, wide-eyed with wonder, never knowing he would someday rule stars. That child had been Orion. long before the crown had settled on his brow, before ambition had sharpened into destiny, and destiny into ruin. Kethra absorbed the memory with clinical precision. She analyzed without emotion, tracing cause and consequence. Her thoughts were disciplined, steady. There is life below, structures intact, no significant military presence. The world is stable, unchanged by time, unchanged. That word cut Orion deeper than any blade. He had changed. The galaxy had changed. Empires had risen and fallen. Worlds had burned. And yet this world still breathed the same air it had when he was human. The brood's bioforms descended through the upper atmosphere without fanfare. They did not blot out the sky as a hive invasion would. They did not darken the stars. They slipped quietly through cloud cover and settled in the shadowed valley beneath a towering white cliff Orion remembered well. It had once been a pilgrimage site, a place where scholars carved poems into stone and lovers swore eternal loyalty at the edge of the cliff's high plateau. Now, moss covered the carvings. The river still sang below. Life still moved gently across the land with no fear of gods or monsters. Kethra emerged first. Her feet touched the soft silver grass with reverence, though she did not understand why. Her long limbs folded with slow grace as she knelt, her posture an imitation of something Orion had once done in this same place, as a boy kneeling to pick a fallen blossom from the riverbank. Zalith was less gentle. His landing cracked stone. He rose like a blade driven upright in the earth, his posture alert, predatory curiosity pulling him forward. Orion felt their sensations, the cool wind against carapace, the subtle vibration of distant animal movement, the way the world felt alive in a way no void or hive structure ever could. The brood breathed not with lungs, but through sensation itself. Orion felt the planet's quiet life like a heartbeat beneath his mind. "We do not consume," Orion said through feeling, "not command. We observe." Zalith moved to the riverbank, where a herd of gentle, antlered beasts grazed. They looked up, unafraid at first. The presence of the brood was too foreign for instinct to categorize. Zalith crouched, studying them. He could have killed them effortlessly. He did not. The smaller organisms around him, winged creatures flitting through the air, landed on his armored shoulders without fear. They chirped softly, their songs echoing in the valley. Zalith tilted his head, listening not to the melody, but to the emotion within it. "This is softness," he said. Kethra's awareness hardened. Softness leads to vulnerability. Vulnerability leads to death. Orion replied, not in words, but in a memory of laughter, of hands held beneath starlight, of warmth that burned brighter than any sun. Life is not only war. The brood pulsed with confusion. The concept was too new, too dangerous. Then movement. Figures approached from the distant settlement. Humans. Not soldiers. Farmers. Shepherds. They saw Kethra and Zalith, and their minds simply could not understand. Their instincts lagged behind their senses. They froze, mouths open, hearts hammering. Orion felt memory rise again. Humans bowing before him, humans lifting weapons against him, humans screaming as his world burned. He did not want to witness it again. Do not harm them. Kethra hesitated only one heartbeat before she stepped back. Obedience, restraint. Zalith remained still, watching. The humans did not run. Instead, they knelt, not out of recognition, not out of devotion, out of primal awe. One of them spoke, voice trembling. We mean no harm." Zalith's head tilted. He reached forward, not to strike, but to touch thought. A whisper of psychic contact, delicate, like fingertips brushing the surface of memory. In an instant, he saw their lives, the quiet cycle of seasons, the fear of storms, the warmth of shared meals, the ache of waiting for something greater, though never knowing what that greater thing might be. Salith withdrew, overwhelmed. So slow, he murmured through the psychic field. So fragile, so finite, and yet they endure. Orion felt something shift inside him, something deep and painful and illuminating. This was what his empire had been meant to protect. Not glory, not power, but the quiet persistence of life. The brood absorbed that understanding, and then the sky trembled. A distant pressure rolled through the atmosphere, a psychic wave so vast and cold it felt like the universe itself drawing breath. The Hive Mind had found them. The river stilled, the wind stopped. Every creature on the planet lifted its head at the same moment, as though hearing a sound that did not exist. Kethra rose to her full height, fear and devotion warring within her. It calls. Salith's spines flared with challenge. Let it come. But Orion knew something the others did not. The hive did not come to reclaim. It came to erase. We must leave, Orion said, not to flee, to choose. The lost brood turned as one, a movement of decision rather than instinct. They did not come to conquer or a mirror. They came to understand. And now they understood this. To remain here would doom the world he once loved. The brood lifted into the sky, their vast bioforms rising silently, leaving only wind-blown grass and the stunned humans kneeling in reverent silence. Oramira would remember them, not as monsters, but as a question. The lost brood returned to the void, and the galaxy began to whisper. The void was silent as the brood withdrew from Oramira, but within their shared consciousness, the echoes of the planet lingered. The scent of silver grass, the songs of small winged creatures, the trembling awe of the humans who knelt not in terror, but in wonder. Those impressions did not fade as the brood travelled. They persisted, repeating softly, like memory struggling to become meaning. Orion remained at the center of that growing awareness, not as ruler, not as god, but as an anchor that held the brood's identity together. Without him, they would slip into instinct, into the pull of the greater hive that still called them home. But the call was no longer absolute. The lost brood had tasted something the hive did not know how to name: choice. The void organisms glided through the emptiness between stars, their bodies shifting to absorb stray radiation. They did not communicate out loud. The conversation existed in the mind lattice that bound them. In that space, Orion's memories played like a slow procession of visions. Salith walked beside those memories, restless in thought. He traced the images of Orion's youth with a predator's curiosity. Children laughing, scholars debating beneath sunlit trees, soldiers training in courtyards paved with white stone. He examined each image with a hunger that had nothing to do with feeding. These lives were fragile. They burned brightly and briefly, and yet they shaped worlds. Kethra did not watch the memories the same way. She monitored them, evaluating what had led to Orion's rise, and more importantly, his fall. Her mind was sharp and disciplined. Where Salith sought meaning, she sought structure. She traced Orion's decisions like following the path of a blade through silk. You tried to create unity, she observed, but unity born from will alone fractures. Unity must be shared, Orion replied, the thought tinged with regret. Not forced, not assumed, earned. Salith let his awareness flare, filled with the spark of new understanding. Then we must learn how unity is earned. The brood fell silent at this notion, each mind turning inward. Unity, to them, had always been instinct, The hive did not earn unity, it was unity, but individuality made unity fragile, beautiful, dangerous, and then something shifted, a faint ripple, not from the hive, not from within, from Orion. A memory surfaced that he had not intended to share. A woman. Her face appeared in the lattice, soft, resolute, with eyes like dusk after rainfall. Her smile was not radiant like stars or fierce like conquest. It was warm, constant, a grounding presence in a world where his crown had grown heavy. Her hand resting gently on his cheek, her voice whispering his name in the quiet hours before dawn. That memory was so gentle, so painfully human, that even Salith froze. Kethra's presence contracted, sudden and uncertain. What is this? Orion felt the ache of it like something tearing open inside him. This was what I lost first. The brood did not speak, they felt. The memory was small compared to the grandeur of empire, the great halls, the battles, the coronations. But it held more weight than any of them. Love, Selith said slowly, the word forming awkwardly. The lattice trembled. The memory spread further. Laughter shared beneath starlight. Two hands clasped across a balcony railing. A promise spoken in a whisper that the galaxy would someday know peace. She had died long before the Empire fell, a sickness no power could stop. Orion had stood at her bedside as the world outside celebrated his coronation. He had become emperor on the same day he became alone. Salith's hunger dimmed, his thoughts quieted. This is pain. Not physical, no, something deeper, something without shape, something that lingers without wound. The brood felt it, not fully, not as Orion had, but they felt enough. Kethra stepped forward in the mind lattice, her presence sharp, deliberate. This emotion weakens, it divides thought, it distorts purpose. Orion's response was soft, but unyielding. It gives purpose. Without it, we become hollow. Salith pulsed an agreement. Yes, yes. This is what we lacked. The hive consumes, but does not live. We can live. Kethra recoiled, not in fear, but in rejection. Her thoughts sharpened like a blade being honed. We are not meant to live. We are meant to endure, to become greater than the finite, to grow beyond the weakness of feeling. This path is the path of collapse. And collapse is what your hive offers, Salith answered, fire crackling in his thoughts. Endless cycles of hunger and silence, a universe stripped clean of meaning. We have stepped beyond that. Kethra turned her awareness toward Orion. Not aggressive, but demanding clarity. Is this what you want? To shape us in the image of your failures? Orion paused. The question struck deeper than Kethra intended. He had failed. His empire had fallen. His love had died. His legacy had turned to ash and dust. What right did he have to shape destiny again? His presence flickered. The brood felt it. Salith surged forward, protective. Do not break. Do not fade. We need your memory, your will. Without you, we are nothing but instinct. Kethra spoke again, but softer now. We cannot replace what you lost. Orion let the memory settle, heavy and unresolved. We do not need to replace it. We need to learn from it. The brood's mind stabilized, and then the void around them shifted. Not physically, psychically. The hive was closer. Not here, not yet, but closing. Their thoughts brushed the edge of the brood's consciousness, cold, vast and impersonal. A presence that dwarfed planets. A will without doubt. Return. The word struck like gravity. The brood shuddered. Salith snarled, his thoughts boiling with defiance. Kethra bowed her head, instinct pulling her to obedience. Orion held them, anchoring them, refusing to let them fracture. No, The refusal rang through them like a bell. The hive pressed harder. Return, become, forget. Orion answered not with memory, not with emotion, but with the one truth the hive could not understand. We choose. The word rippled outward, a shockwave through the psychic ocean. The brood steadied. Kethra stood tall, no longer bending. Salith's spines flared in silent acknowledgement. The hive fell back, not defeated, but waiting. It understood something new now. Its lost fragment had grown teeth. The void organisms shifted course, gliding toward darker space, uncharted, unknown, untouched. The brood no longer traveled to remember. It traveled to become. But deep in the shared mind, Orion's heart ached. For becoming meant change. And change meant loss. Always. The void darkened as the lost brood drifted deeper into uncharted space. But their silence was no longer the silence of instinct. It was the silence of thought, of something newly awakened attempting to understand itself. The psychic lattice that bound them pulsed steadily, no longer wavering as it once had. Orion remained the center point of that structure, but the brood no longer clung to him. They now stood beside him, two wills forming shape where once there had been only hunger. Yet even now, something cold trailed behind them. The hive mind had not spoken again since the command to return. But the absence of pressure did not bring relief. It was the silence of a predator waiting in the dark, watching its prey discover freedom only so that it could savor the moment of taking it back. The lost brood felt that awareness always at the edge of perception, a distant gravity pulling, patient, inevitable. Orion felt it most clearly. He had been inside the hive once. He knew how it thought. The hive did not rage. It did not feel insult. It simply corrected deviation. And the lost brood was deviation incarnate. Their movement through the void slowed as they approached an expanse of starless emptiness, where even the Imperium's maps flickered into guessing. Here, nebulae curled like ghosts, and the background radiation dipped into near nothing. It was a region avoided not because of threat, but because there was nothing here to claim. No mineral wealth, no habitable worlds, no strategic nodes. But the lost brood had not come seeking any of those things. They had come seeking silence enough to think. Salith was the first to break the stillness within the lattice. We cannot run forever. He stood upon the hull of one of the great void beasts, the bioform's hardened carapace reflecting faint starlight. The beast drifted, motionless, except for the slow ripple of membrane that propelled it through the dark. Salith's posture was taut, restless, like a coiled blade waiting for purpose. His mind burned with tension he could not shed. The memory of Oramira, of life untouched by war, of softness and vulnerability, had not weakened him. It had sharpened something inside him. Kethra floated nearby, her limbs folded close, presence steady and composed. Her discipline had been shaken, but not broken. The encounter with the hive's will had reminded her of what they opposed, and her devotion had turned not to the hive, but to survival. "We are not running," she said. "We are determining how to stand." Salith turned toward her, his thoughts sharp. "And when the hive arrives, how will we stand? With emotion, with memory, with hesitation?" Kethra's response was unflinching, with understanding. The word echoed through the lattice, deliberate and precise. Understanding was the axis of everything now. The hive acted without it. The brood now shaped itself through it. Orion felt the shift in the psychic field. The brood was no longer simply reacting. They were forming identity, choice, belief. But belief without anchor was fragile. And Orion had not yet answered the question that lay beneath all of this. What are we to become? The memory of his lost love flickered again, not as pain this time, but as quiet clarity. He remembered her voice, speaking to him on a night when he still wore mortal skin and mortal worries. "You cannot force meaning into the world," she had told him. "You can only choose the meaning you will live for." Orion let that memory flow through the lattice, not as command, not as lesson, as offering. Salith stilled. Kethra bowed her head slowly. Meaning, not survival, not consumption. Meaning. The brood felt the shape of that word ripple through them. But before the thought could settle, the void itself shuddered. A wave of psychic force rolled across their awareness. Not a command, a search pattern. The hive mind was sweeping the void, seeking the anomaly. Zalith braced, spines flaring. Kethra froze with sharp alertness. Orion reached outward, not physically, but through memory. The hive's presence washed over him, cold and endless. It was not malicious. It did not need to be. Malice was a waste of energy. The hive simply was inevitability. Its voice came not as language, but as gravitational pressure. Return, not a request, not a threat, a fact. The lost brood held. Kethra trembled, not in fear, but in instinctive obedience that no longer fit the shape of who she was. Salith snarled, not with anger, but with identity. "We are not you." The hive pressed harder. "Identity is illusion." The pressure tightened around them, as though the psychic ocean thickened into iron. The brood's thoughts strained. Their shared awareness flickered. If they broke cohesion here, even for a moment, they would dissolve. Their individuality would be stripped. Orion would fade into the ocean of consciousness, his memories scattered like dust in sunlight. Orion gathered himself, not as emperor, not as god, not as survivor, as one who had loved. He reached outward not to resist, but to hold shape. He stabilized the brood's lattice with memory, laughter on riverbanks, sap-stained hands from climbing orchard trees, quiet games played under midday sun, futures imagined but never reached. The hive did not understand this. It recoiled, not defeated, but confused. Confusion was the first time the hive had felt anything other than certainty. The pressure withdrew, just slightly. Kethra exhaled, not breath, but release. Salith steadied. The brood remained whole. Orion understood now. The hive did not fear them. It could not fear. But it had recognized something in them that could not be assimilated easily. Not power, not rebellion, uniqueness. The hive had no response to something that could not be replaced. The lattice quieted, like ripples settling on a dark lake. Kethra spoke, voice steady once more. "We cannot face it as we are. We must become more." Salith's thoughts hardened into purpose. Then we evolve, not by devouring, by shaping, by choosing. Orion let their resolve settle before he answered. "We must find knowledge. We must learn from others, not to consume them, but to understand ourselves." The brood turned its attention toward the void once more, searching. They found something. Not life, not a world. A station, ancient, derelict, drifting in the gravity well of a failed star. Its structure was built of unfamiliar alloy, geometric and stark. No Imperium vessel, no Eldar craft. Something older, something forgotten. Kethra examined with caution. There are no life signatures, but there is memory. Salith's thoughts ignited with fierce anticipation. Then we claim it. The brood shifted course. The derelict station grew larger in the void, like a monolith waiting for those bold or desperate enough to seek what lay inside. As they approached, Orion felt something stir within the lattice. Not memory, recognition. He had never seen this place in life, yet something about it felt familiar, as though destiny had been waiting here for him long before he was born. The lost brood descended toward the station. The hive watched from the dark beyond the stars, and the future began to turn. The derelict station hung suspended in the gravity well of the failed star, its metal surface reflecting faint, broken shards of light. It was vast, larger than any orbital platform Orion remembered from his empire. Its structure was not smooth or uniform, but layered like the exoskeleton of some colossal insect fossilized in orbit. It had no banners, no lights burning in its halls, no signals to greet or warn. It simply existed, ancient and waiting. The lost brood approached it in silence. Their great void beast drifted through the dark and wrapped themselves around the hull, clinging without force. Tendrils extended, testing the integrity of the metal, dense, refined, nearly impossible to pierce. Yet the brood did not attempt to break through. Instead, they listened. They learned. Kethra placed her clawed hand against the surface, and a ripple of psychic resonance vibrated through her, then through the brood, then finally to Orion. "There is thought here," she said quietly. "Not alive, not aware, but memory." Salith's presence pulsed sharply. "Then we open it." Orion hesitated. The structure felt too precise, too deliberate. It was not abandoned. It was preserved, waiting. And for the first time, Orion did not know if they approached something meant to be found or something meant to be forgotten. But the brood needed knowledge, and the galaxy offered no safe answers. "Open it," Orion agreed. Kethra extended her hand again, not tearing, not forcing. Instead, she hummed a pattern through the psychic lattice. A resonance formed from the brood's new unity. The metal trembled, shifted, and unfolded like a sealed chrysalis remembering how to open. Massive petals of alloy withdrew in silence, revealing a dark corridor leading into the station's interior. The brood entered. The inside of the station was not dark as expected. The walls glowed faintly with phosphorescent veins that pulsed like circulatory channels. The corridors were wide, smooth, and elegant in design, not built for human use. There were no corners, no sharp edges. Everything curved smoothly, as though shaped by liquid rather than tools. Orion recognized the integrity of the structure as purposeful, the way a cathedral's architecture was built to reflect the soul of worship. This place was not made for life. It was made for memory. Salith's steps echoed softly, though his armored form did not make sound. His awareness prowled forward, alert and hungry. Kethra followed behind him, her posture that of a guardian rather than a subordinate. Orion moved with them. Though he had no physical body, his presence flowed through both of them, through the walls, through the structure itself. The brood reached a central chamber, a vast circular expanse lit from above by a dome of shifting iridescent light. At the chamber's center stood a column of glass-like crystal, reaching from floor to ceiling. Suspended within it was a figure, not human, not tyrannid, something else. Its form was slender and tall, elongated like the Eldar, but its limbs were thicker, reinforced, built for endurance rather than grace. Its skull was elongated and smooth, lacking eyes, but bearing intricate lines carved into its surface, lines that glowed faintly with psychic energy. The being was suspended, as though preserved in liquid memory, neither decayed nor alive. Kethra stepped closer. "This is no corpse." Salith leaned forward, fascinated. "It is waiting." Orion felt memory stir, not from his past, but from the station itself. Images flickered across the psychic lattice. a race that walked among stars before the birth of the Imperium, a civilization that had shaped worlds through thought and structure. Their minds had touched the warp not to consume or be consumed, but to record, to archive, to preserve memory against the erosion of time. This station was a vault of history, but history stored for whom? Salith moved closer to the crystal column. As he reached out, the chamber shifted, not physically, but in perception. A projection of thought unfolded like a dream called into waking. Orion stood again in his throne room, but not as memory. He stood as observer. He saw himself seated on the throne of the celestial dominion, regal and composed. His crown gleamed. His eyes were proud. But then another figure stepped forward from the council, Kalis, the one who had once been friend, the one whose trust had been broken, the one whose betrayal had sparked collapse. Except this Kalis was not memory. This was Kalis watching Orion, judging him, waiting for the moment Orion would choose his empire over his people. Salith watched the scene unfold, fascinated. "You believed yourself righteous," he said. Orion did not deny it. "I believed unity required direction." Kethra stepped beside him, her mental presence sharp. Direction became control. Control became fear. Fear became rebellion. Orion felt the weight of those words, but did not look away. In his time, he had convinced himself that strength was protection, that the empire needed a single guiding will, that compromise was weakness. He had believed that sacrifice was necessary, that his burden justified itself. He saw now that the burden had crushed what it was meant to save. The chamber shifted again, showing the night of his lover's death, the world outside celebrating him, the world inside collapsing in silence. Orion watched, himself kneel beside her bed and hold her hand long after her breath had stopped. The memory did not break him, it steadied him. Salith saw and understood something new. Pain shapes will. Kethra saw and understood something else. Will must not erase compassion. The crystal figure in the column shifted slightly, not physically, but in resonance. Its presence spoke not in voice, but in concept. One who has fallen understands. The chamber filled with a whispering chorus of thought. The strength to rule is not the same as the strength to guide without domination, to lead without consuming, to become more without erasing what was. Orion felt the truth of it. The brood had the power of the hive. But if they attempted to build an empire through domination, they would become the hive. If they built identity through hunger, they would become hunger. Their future depended on balance. Salith stepped back. Realization dawning. We must evolve not through what we take from others, but through what we become ourselves. Kethra bowed her head, accepting the path not as weakness, but as discipline. And Orion understood the message of the ancient station. This place had been built by a civilization that had refused both the warp's corruption and the cold certainty of logic without soul. They had chosen memory as legacy. The crystal being's presence faded, leaving silence. The lost brood turned back toward the void. Their course was set now, not by instinct but by intent. They would not consume the galaxy. They would shape themselves within it. But as they departed the derelict station, the hive mind watched from beyond the stars, no longer curious, no longer confused. Now it understood what the lost brood sought: identity. And identity was the one thing the hive could not permit. The silence in the void deepened, heavy with the promise of conflict. The first war was coming, not for territory, not for survival, but for the right to exist. The lost brood drifted from the ancient station with a new clarity, though clarity did not erase uncertainty. Purpose was not instinct, and instinct still thrummed in their veins. Hunger had not vanished. It had only been quieted. That quiet was fragile. Fragile like newly formed glass, thin enough to crack beneath the slightest pressure. The void creatures carried the brood through deep space toward a new star system. One Orion recognized not from memory, but from the faint network of star maps that still lingered in the Dominion archives buried within his recollection. The system was small, dim, and insignificant by imperial measures. Only one world bore life, and not advanced life. A frontier colony, a world settled by those who wished to escape the chaos of the Imperium's endless wars, believing isolation would protect them from the violence of history. It was called Viridian. It orbited a pale yellow star, its surface dominated by vast plains of golden grass broken by mesas of copper-red stone. It was quiet, self-sustaining. It had no fortress, no orbital defenses, no fleets, only life. Simple, unguarded, trusting life. It was the kind of world Orion had once sworn to protect. As the brood descended toward Viridian's upper atmosphere, instinct stirred, not thought, not memory, hunger. A pulse moved through the lattice, subtle, primal, like the first tremor of a dormant volcano. For the first time since they had separated from the greater hive, the urge to consume surged without warning. Salith stopped mid-motion. Kethra straightened sharply, her carapace tightening along her spine. The brood's lesser organisms shifted in silent anticipation. Wings unfurled, claws extended, mandibles flexed. The world below called to them, not with fear or challenge, but with the invitation of ecological simplicity. It was defenseless, it was vulnerable. Consuming it would be effortless. Orion felt the rumble of instinct rolling through them like thunder. His presence wavered, then forced itself to steady. Not this world. The words did not command. They steadied. Salith's mind flared, wide and strained. It is not thought. It is need. The pull is too strong. We were shaped to feed. We cannot deny what we are. Kethra's thoughts clenched, sharp as metal. Purpose is not the absence of hunger. It is the control of it. The brood shuddered. The instinct did not pass. It intensified. Viridian's biosphere sang to them like a feast laid across a banquet hall. Every inhalation of the atmosphere carried the scent of biomass rich in protein and cellular complexity. The brood creaked with pressure, their bodies aching to fulfill their design. Salith's claws dug into the void beast beneath him, carving long grooves. Control is illusion. The hive does not restrain hunger. Hunger is the hive. Orion's voice cut through the storm like a blade forged of memory and sorrow. Then we are not the hive. The claw in Salith's grasp stilled, though instinct still writhed beneath his carapace. Kethra turned her gaze to the world below, not with hunger, but with calculation. Her thoughts were slow, disciplined. We cannot consume and remain separate. The moment we take, we begin to become again. The spiral leads back to dissolution. Salith's response trembled, not in weakness, but in conflict. Then what are we, if not hunger? Orion answered with the memory of Viridian settlers, though he had never known them personally. He remembered the type of people who fled the Imperium, those who wished for peace, the ones who believed hope could still be grown in untouched soil. We are what we choose to become. The brood descended further. The atmosphere thickened around them, clouds breaking across wings and carapace. The world came into clearer view. Villages nestled near riverbanks, fields tended by hands not hardened into weapons, children running across the plains with laughter that did not know fear. The instinct surged again, harder, stronger. Biomass, life, fuel, consume, evolve. Orion felt the brood's cohesion begin to strain. The lattice flickered, pulses disconnecting. Salith's mind strained under the weight of pressure. "We can become more if we feed," Salith insisted. "Evolution demands cost." Orion's reply was quiet and unshakable. Evolution without purpose is collapse. The brood landed at the edge of a valley where the settlers had gathered harvest crops for the coming season. The humans stopped, tools frozen mid-motion, eyes wide with disbelief. Not horror, not immediately. Wonder. Even now, the lost brood did not resemble the nightmare tyrannids of imperial records. They stood differently, carried themselves differently. Their posture did not mirror predation. They were not advancing. They were steady, observing. The settlers' voices trembled. Are you angels?" one whispered. Salith flinched, not in pain, in shame. Angels. The word struck him with a weight he did not understand. He turned sharply away, struggling to keep the hunger inside its cage. Kethra stepped forward, measured, controlled. Her presence was not gentle, but it was not threatening. "We will not harm you." The settlers did not understand the words, but they understood the stillness, the restraint. Orion watched as a child approached, holding a flower, a small star-shaped blossom, pale blue and trembling in the child's small hand. She lifted it to Kethra. Kethra froze. The lattice went silent. The child smiled. Kethra accepted the flower, not because she understood gesture, not because she saw symbolism, but because she recognized something fragile that did not fear her. Salith's hunger cracked, not breaking, transforming. Orion's presence folded around them like a hand closing over an open wound. "We do not consume." The brood answered as one, not forced, not commanded. "We do not consume." The instinct did not vanish, but it bowed. The settlers watched as the brood stepped back, not retreating, but choosing distance, choosing restraint. The humans whispered prayers, not to gods, to hope. Salith trembled, not out of hunger now, but out of the enormity of what they had done, or rather, what they had not done. "We denied our nature," he whispered. Orion's answer came not from memory, but from revelation. "No, we reshaped it." The brood lifted into the sky. Viridian remained untouched, alive. Orion watched it fade beneath them, and something inside him eased, just a fraction. But in the deep dark behind them, the hive mind stirred, not confused now, not merely observing. It had seen restraint, and where there was restraint, there was divergence. Divergence was infection. The hive mind's attention tightened like a noose. The lost brood's choice had been made. The hive would not allow a second. The brood left Viridian behind, ascending into the void with wings that did not beat and bodies that did not tire. The planet became a pale sphere of gold and river blue, shrinking into a distant memory as the dark closed around them once more. But what lingered was not the world itself. It was the moment, the choice. The brood had denied their hunger. They had rewritten instinct with will, yet will had consequences. Salith was the first to feel the tension. It began as a vibration beneath his armored plates, subtle at first, then steady, then unmistakable. The psychic lattice that held the brood together thrummed harder than before, like a cord drawn too tight. The mind that had once been unified now carried strain, not division, not fracture, pressure. Kethra felt it too, though she did not flinch. Her posture remained composed, but the flow of her thoughts grew sharper, more disciplined, like blades aligning in a precise pattern. Orion felt it strongest. The brood did not understand what Viridian had cost, but he did. Choice had drawn the hive's gaze closer, not as a distant presence now, as pursuit. The void around them was no longer empty. The threads of the warp trembled with ripples that were not natural. Space itself seemed to pull inward, as though the brood moved through the wake of something enormous and unseen. The hive mind did not rush. It did not chase. It simply approached, as a tide approaches a shore, inevitable, patient, absolute. Salith turned his gaze outward, his thoughts edged with defiance. It follows. Kethra's response was steady, calm. It hunts. Hunt was not the right word. The hive mind did not hunt because hunting required desire. The hive mind was an ocean eroding a stone, a glacier pressing down upon earth, a star collapsing under its own weight. It did not want to reclaim the lost brood. It would, unless something changed. Orion reached across the lattice, stabilizing their cohesion as the psychic pressure increased. "We move toward the outer corridors of the Orion Spur," he said slowly. "There is a region there where the warp storms never settle. The hive cannot easily extend its will into turbulence." Salith's body tensed. To hide? No. To think. To prepare. Lessons from Oromira. Lessons from Viridian. Lessons from the station. All converging now. The brood did not flee. They repositioned, but not alone. Unbeknownst to them, Viridian was not as isolated as it appeared. In the hours after the brood's departure, the colonists had done what humans always do when faced with the extraordinary. They spoke. Whispers became stories. Stories became transmissions. A message left Viridian's surface on a narrow-band civilian signal, low-powered and trembling with awe. They called them angels. They said they saw beings of living armor and impossible grace who did not strike, did not consume, did not destroy. They asked if these were emissaries of the Emperor or heralds of something yet unknown. They spoke of flowers placed in hands shaped of chitin, of creatures who stood in stillness instead of violence. The message traveled through relay satellites, through merchant vessels, through stray Vox signals. It reached Imperial space, and with it came interest. The Imperium did not believe in miracles, but it feared the unknown. Even now, aboard the fast frigate Saint Alexia, an inquisitor reviewed the message with narrowed eyes. She did not speak. She did not react. She simply listened, then listened again, then ordered her ship to trace the signal's origin and proceed at once. Her name was Inquisitor Lorraine Vaust. Her mind was a weapon honed on secrecy and silence. She would not arrive soon, but she would arrive. The brood did not yet know this. They only knew the pressure of the hive. Salith paced across the outer carapace of a void beast, his claws scraping faint sparks from the hardened plates. The hunger still lived in him, but it no longer defined him. What defined him now was something deeper, a word he had learned only in concept: purpose. Yet purpose without direction twisted into conflict. He turned sharply toward Orion. "We chose restraint. But what do we build? We cannot remain travelers in the void forever. We must shape something, a world, a home, a form that defines us." Kethra's thoughts flowed like a calm river. Home is not claimed. Home is created. Salith's response was a flare of energy. "Then let us choose a world to begin." But Orion did not answer, because something had changed within him. The memory of the ancient station lingered, the crystalline figure suspended in stillness, a relic of a civilization that had shaped memory as legacy. That civilization had tried to preserve identity against time, and it still died. And his empire had tried to preserve unity through control, and it still died. Everything he had ever known had fallen, perhaps because he had built too quickly, perhaps because he had never allowed time to shape meaning. He spoke slowly, the words forming in the psychic lattice like stones settling into foundation. "We do not choose a world yet." Salith bristled. "Why?" "Because we are not yet whole." Kethra bowed her head, understanding, though the understanding pained her. Salith trembled, not in fear, but in frustration. Orion continued, "If we shape a world now, we will build it from conflict between what we were and what we are becoming. We must resolve who we are before we shape what we will be." Salith's silence was heavy, but not rejecting. Orion turned his awareness outward, toward the distant inner stars of the Imperium. "There is one who remains from my past, one who knew me before empire, before war, before fall." Salith's gaze sharpened. Kalis. The name echoed through the brood like a bell tolling across a quiet plain. The betrayal that ended Orion's reign. The friend who had broken him. The fracture that had shaped everything. Kethra understood the meaning immediately. "We must find him. His presence shapes your memory. Your memory shapes us. Without clarity there, we remain divided." Salith exhaled slowly. "Then we seek the betrayer." Orion did not speak, because betrayal was never simple. Sometimes the betrayer was not the one who failed. Sometimes the betrayed had been wrong. The course shifted. The void beasts angled their bodies and folded their fins to accelerate. The brood turned toward a region Orion had sworn never to return to, even before his death. The Imperial Heartlands. Not toward war, not toward conquest, toward a conversation that had been waiting across centuries. But the Hive Mind felt that shift. Identity was gathering form. An identity, once solid, could not be unmade. The Hive Mind's presence surged, no longer patient. It began to move, and the stars watched in silence. The brood traveled toward the Imperium's inner reaches, though not directly. They moved through shadowed lanes of the void, slipping between warp storms and dead stars, traveling in silence to avoid drawing attention. Yet attention had already begun to coil around them. Viridian's message spread like a spark in dry grass, catching the curiosity of worlds too accustomed to despair. Whispers of angels in chitin, of monsters that did not devour, drifted into vox channels, trader gossip, half-coded astropathic fragments. The Imperium did not yet believe, but it had begun to watch, and the Hive was watching too. The psychic pressure followed them, closer now. Not overwhelming, but focused. The Hive Mind had begun to narrow its perception like a lens adjusting to clarity. It did not rage. It did not rush. It moved with inevitability. Any fragment of itself that could remember individuality must be erased. Yet the brood did not break. Orion held them steady. It was not leadership in the way he had once understood it. Not command, not authority. It was presence. It was the quiet resolve of someone who had already lost everything and therefore had nothing left to fear, not even the impossible. They traveled toward a world Orion remembered only faintly. It had once been a starport and diplomatic hub of the Dominion, a neutral ground for commerce, culture, and discourse. Orion had walked there without guards, without banners, without the weight of empire pressing down upon him. He had met Kalis there, not as ruler and advisor, but as two men discussing the future of a world not yet defined. The world was called Solhara Prime, yet as the brood approached, they found only ruin. The planet hung in orbit of a dying star, its surface cracked and burned. The atmosphere was thin, barely breathable. Cities lay shattered, skeletal towers reaching toward the sky like pleading hands. No life remained, not even scavengers. A world once alive with music, trade, ideas, now silent. The brood descended to the surface. Salith's feet struck cracked stone. Dust rose in a slow drift, undisturbed for decades. Kethra walked behind him, her posture measured, her senses scanning for any trace of life. Orion hovered within them both, no longer jarred by the sight of destruction. He had seen worlds fall. He had seen civilizations reduced to echoes, but something was different about this ruin. The destruction had not come from war. There were no blast marks, no collapsed fortresses, no craters of orbital bombardment. Instead, the structures had simply stopped. Time had eroded what life had refused to rebuild. It died not from violence, Orion murmured, but from abandonment. Kethra reached down and lifted a broken shard of pottery from beneath a collapsed walkway. On its surface, the faint trace of a painted sigil, a sun rising over water, a symbol of hope, a symbol of renewal. Hope had not saved this world. Salith looked across the shattered skyline. His voice was quiet. Kalis did not die here. No, Orion knew that without thought or reasoning. Kalis had never accepted stagnation. He had always moved forward, always sought a future, even when Orion had clung too tightly to the past. If Solhara fell, Kalis moved on. But to where? The answer came not through memory, but through instinct. Orion felt a trace, like the echo of a voice in a cavern, faint but unmistakable. Orion followed the echo across the city toward a central plaza. The ground here had once been polished marble, now cracked. In its center stood a statue toppled onto its side. Orion recognized the form. Two figures standing together, hands clasped, raised toward a rising star, himself and Kalis. But the face of Orion had been shattered with deliberate force, ground to dust beneath countless footsteps. Kalis's face remained untouched. Kethra observed the statue closely. This was not vandalism of hatred. It was rejection of memory. Salith's gaze burned. He erased your image, your legacy. Orion did not deny it. Yes. Salith's claws clenched. Then he is enemy. Orion's voice flowed through the lattice like steady tide. No, he is the one who saw what I refused to see. He was not wrong. I was. The brood held that silence, letting the admission settle into the foundations of identity. Orion's empire did not fall because of betrayal. It fell because he had believed unity could be forced, guided by one will. The statue here was not defacement. It was correction. But one question remained. Where had Kalis gone? Kethra extended her awareness deeper into the lattice, into the residue of thought that lingered on Solhara Prime like faint markings on old parchment. The planet might have died, but memory remained. Not the memory of individuals, but of movement, migration, exile. Orion felt it. A vessel had departed this world at the end, not fleeing fear, carrying purpose, to the border regions, to the outer colonies, to worlds not yet claimed by the Imperium. Kalis had not hidden. He had continued the dream Orion had abandoned. Salith's thoughts sharpened. We follow. Yes, Orion replied. But before they could rise from the planet's surface, something stirred in the sky. Not the hive, something smaller. Metallic silhouettes entered high orbit, sleek and angular. Engines lit with the cold blue, burn of Imperial design. A frigate and two escorts, their weapon arrays powered slowly, not in warning, but in caution. The Vox channel opened, transmitting across open frequency. "This is Inquisitor Lorraine Vaust of the Ordo Xenos. Identify yourselves." Her voice was calm, controlled, not fearful, not aggressive. A voice accustomed to standing before the unknown without flinching. Salith bristled. "Imperium." Kethra stepped forward, her presence focused and analytical. "They are not yet attacking. They seek understanding." Orion remembered Lorraine's name, only faintly, a whisper from years before his fall. She had been a junior interrogator then, studying diplomacy before being pulled into the machinery of the Inquisition. She had spoken at a gathering once, arguing that understanding the unknown was not weakness. That fear blinded the Imperium more than any foe. Now she had come to study them. Orion projected through the lattice, sending not words, but intention. "We do not seek harm." The Vox channel flickered. Silence. Then speak. Show us what you are. Salith's mind surged. "We could destroy them," Kethra countered immediately. "But if we begin with destruction, we become what the Hive expects us to be." Orion stepped forward, not physically, but psychically. He opened the lattice, not fully, not vulnerably, just enough for the Inquisitor to feel intent, not thought. A silent message. "We choose restraint." On the bridge of the St. Alexia, Lirani stiffened, but did not recoil. She felt no malice, no hunger. Something else entirely, something impossible. She lowered her hand away from the firing command. "Then show me your truth," she said. But before Orion could answer, the void screamed. A psychic shockwave slammed through the system. The Hive Mind's attention surged, sudden and vast, compressing reality like a fist closing around a fragile object. The Hive had arrived. Not physically, not yet. But its will crashed into the brood's consciousness with relentless force. Return. No return, no return. The lattice buckled. Salith roared. Not with voice, but with every fibre of his being. Kethra braced, holding unity with the discipline of a warrior facing a tidal wave. Orion anchored them, memory burning like a star that refused to die. The Hive's will tore at them, dragging, pulling, erasing. Orion's voice cut through the storm. "We are not you." The Hive struck harder. Identity is illusion. Orion answered with the memory of Viridian, of a child offering a flower, of a world spared, of choice. The pressure broke, just for a moment. The brood held. The Hive withdrew. Not in defeat, but reassessment. The Inquisitor's voice returned. "What are you?" Orion answered. "Beings who remember." The brood rose from Solhara's surface. Their path was now set. They would find Kalis, and the galaxy would tremble not at hunger, but at choice. The brood ascended from Solhara Prime in silence, their massive void beast drifting upward through the thinning atmosphere until the world lay beneath them like a shattered memory. The humans of Viridian had called them angels. The Imperium now watched them with wary fascination. And the Hive, patient, vast, inevitable, had begun to move with purpose. The air around them trembled not with sound but with pressure. A psychic tide rolled through the void, subtle at first, then rising, then pulsing like a heartbeat that was not their own. It was the Hive Mind hunting, not with fury, not with emotion, but with certainty. Kethra felt the tremor first. Her stance shifted, her body tensing, her thoughts narrowing into a blade of discipline. Salith lifted his head sharply, spines flaring along his back as though responding to some unseen predator. Orion felt it like a cold shadow spreading across memory itself. The Hive was closing, not yet visible, not in body, but in will. The brood travelled through the void, and the void no longer felt empty. It felt observed, not watched by eyes, observed by intention. The kind of attention gravity gives to a falling stone. They continued toward Kalis's last trajectory, toward the outer colonies, toward the edges of what had once been their shared dream. But each moment, the pressure drew tighter, like hands slowly closing around the throat of a candle flame, trying to smother the spark before it could become fire. Zalith's thoughts churned like a storm. We must strike first. Attack the hive, Kethra answered, her tone calm but laced with disbelief. To strike the ocean because we fear drowning is not strategy. It is panic. Zalith's response came sharp with instinct and the remnants of hunger. If we wait, we are swallowed. Orion did not rebuke him, not because Zalith was right, but because fear was a reasonable shape in a moment like this. Orion had known that fear in life, the fear of losing what he had built, the fear of watching everything slip out of his control. It had shaped him wrongly then. It could shape them wrongly now. We do not strike blindly, Orion said. The hive does not move without structure. It sends tendrils before the bulk, scouts, precursors, smaller fleets. If those reach us before we are ready, we fracture, Kethra finished. The brood continued through the void. Stars flickered and vanished into distance. Nebulae curled like sleeping colossi. Dust lanes stretched across the darkness like scars. But their course remained steady, until the void ahead of them lit with a sudden, unnatural glow. A shimmering curtain of emerald and violet aurora spread across space, sweeping outward like a veil. The void beasts stopped as one, their motion ceasing without hesitation. Kethra's senses rippled outward, examining the anomaly. Warpstorm filament, she said, but contained, directed. The hive has shaped it. Zalith's posture lowered into a predatory stance, not in preparation to attack, but in instinctive readiness. It is a net. Orion felt it too. The hive mind was not merely chasing, it was herding them. The anomaly was a psychic barrier, not physical, but one that would disorient, disrupt, unmake cohesion. A trap made not of violence, but of certainty. If they crossed into it without preparation, the brood's consciousness would splinter, identity would dissolve, they would return to instinct, the hive would reclaim them. Kethra stepped closer to Orion within the lattice. We must pass through. Kalis lies beyond. Our future lies beyond. Zalith answered, his thoughts burning like a flare in darkness. Then we break the storm. Orion did not move to restrain him. Instead, he let the silence expand, letting the brood feel the magnitude of the moment. They had denied hunger. They had denied instinct. Now they would deny inevitability. He spoke slowly, not as ruler, not as command, but as memory. When I crossed the threshold into empire, I believed force made destiny. I was wrong. Destiny is shaped not by force, but by conviction in the moment where retreat seems wisdom and forward motion seems doom. Zalith's spines relaxed. Kethra bowed her head, not in obedience, but in shared understanding. We passed through together. The void beast moved, wings expanding, membranes tightening, muscles flexing in silent anticipation. The brood arranged themselves in formation, not of rank, but of harmony. Orion's consciousness flowed across them, aligning thought to thought, memory to instinct, identity to body. Then they entered the storm. The sky bled, not with color, but with thought. Emerald and violet waves rippled through space, cascading through the lattice like lightning. The brood staggered, not physically, but within the mind. Shapes dissolved. Individualities flickered. Voices warped into echoes of themselves. Salith's roar fractured into 1,000 snarls. Kethra's presence flickered like a flame in wind. Orion felt the pull, deep and vast, the hive mind calling them home. Return. The storm pressed into them. Memories blurred. Orion saw himself again on his throne. Saw Kalis walking away. Saw his empire burning. Saw Viridian's child offering a flower. Saw the ancient station. Saw the crystal figure suspended in stillness. Saw the woman he loved smiling in the last light before death. Return. Zalith broke first, not fully, but his identity slipped. His hunger surged. His instincts flared. Kethra fought to hold the lattice together, her discipline bending under pressure that no mortal mind could withstand. Orion felt the brood collapsing. He reached not into power, not into strength, into memory, into the one thing the hive could not understand. He remembered her hand in his, her voice speaking his name, not emperor, not god, just Orion. He spoke that name into the lattice, not authority, not command, identity, Orion. The brood steadied, not by force, by self. Salith's roar returned to unity, sharp and clear. Kethra's thoughts aligned into stillness. The storm broke, not behind them, not ahead, but around them. They did not overcome it. They passed through it unchanged. The auroral curtain faded behind them. Silence returned. The hive mind felt the result. For the first time since it had devoured its first world. It hesitated. The brood emerged into open void. And in the distance, just at the threshold of the next star system, a planet glowed faintly with life. Not the Imperium, not the Dominion. A world of settlers. A world of dreamers. A world of those who had left Solhara to carry hope onward. Kalis's world. Orion felt no triumph, only the quiet weight of what must come next. Not reunion, not forgiveness, understanding. For the first time, Salith did not speak first. He waited. Kethra waited. The brood waited. Orion spoke. We go together. They descended toward the world, and as they did, the hive mind turned its full focus upon them. The first battle would not be of claws or teeth or weapons. It would be of identity. An identity is never won without sacrifice. The brood descended toward the world below, their great void beasts folding their wings as they sank into atmosphere. The planet was lush. Vibrant green forests spread across continents. Rivers wound like silver veins, and mountains rose like ancient guardians watching over quiet valleys. It was not a world of industry or empire. It was a settlement of refuge, a place chosen by those who had left war behind. Here people live simply, building with their hands rather than machines, planting gardens rather than raising armies. Hope had taken root here, fragile but real. Orion recognized the spirit of the world long before it came into view. Kalis had chosen this place because it was everything Orion's empire had failed to become. A place where unity was not commanded, but grown naturally. A place where power meant responsibility, not control. But Kalis himself was not visible. Not yet. The brood landed in the shadow of a forest clearing, their approach silent, their forms neither threatening nor concealed. Salith stood tall, posture sharpened by instinct, but softened by new understanding. Kethra moved with slow grace, her presence watchful but not aggressive. The lesser organisms stood back, waiting, not for orders, but for purpose. The settlers saw them, first as distant shapes, like statues among the trees, then as figures of impossible form, armored bodies, blade-like limbs, chitin that shimmered with faint internal luminescence. Fear came first. It always did. Hands tightened on tools, breath caught in throats. Mothers drew children close, but no one ran. These settlers, like those of Viridian, were not hardened soldiers. They had fled war, not prepared for it. They knew fear, but they also knew that running did not prevent suffering. Orion felt the moment when memory touched recognition. They had heard stories of the angels who spared a world, of the monsters who chose restraint. A single voice broke the silence. "Are you the same ones?" It was an old man who spoke. His voice was quiet, cracked with age and wind, but steady. His eyes did not show reverence. They showed searching. Orion answered, not aloud, but through the lattice, projecting thought into presence. The settlers did not hear words, but they felt meaning. Yes. The old man lowered his head, not in worship, in acknowledgement. "You're looking for him?" Orion's presence trembled. "Yes." The old man nodded once. "Then you will find him in the High Valley. He built his home there, alone mostly, except for the ones who still believe peace is possible." Zalith's thoughts rose sharp and wary. If he leads them, he could influence them against us. Orion responded with quiet certainty. Influence is not control. The man pointed toward the mountains, where peaks shimmered in morning sun. He'll be waiting, he always is, for everything he tried to prevent to finally arrive. The brood moved toward the mountains, leaving the settlement untouched. The path wound upward through forests filled with birdsong and the crisp scent of pine. The higher they climbed, the more the air thinned, and the more the world grew still. It was a place shaped not for war, but for reflection. At the highest plateau, where the world opened to endless sky, they found a solitary structure, a simple dwelling of stone and timber, built by hand. Smoke drifted softly from a chimney. A small garden grew outside, tended with care. Nothing grand, nothing imperial. Kalis stood beside the garden, pruning a flowering shrub. His hair was white now, though his movements were steady. His presence centered like a stone shaped by time rather than eroded by it. He did not turn as the brood approached. He spoke first, voice calm, the way one speaks when greeting something already expected. "You took longer than I thought you would." Orion's presence quivered. Zalith tensed, instinct flaring. Kethra remained perfectly still. Kalis set down his shears and turned. His eyes were not angry, not afraid, not worshipful. They were tired. "Hello, Orion." The lattice shuddered with the weight of the moment. Orion did not appear as a figure. He existed only as presence, memory shaped into awareness. Kalis regarded that presence with no hesitation. Zalith stepped forward, voice resonant not in sound but in the air itself. "You shattered his legacy." Kalis did not look away. "He needed it shattered," Kethra asked, her tone sharper than any weapon. "Why?" Kalis exhaled softly and looked out over the valley, as if the mountains themselves needed to hear the truth. Because Orion believed unity could be held together by one will unchallenged. Because he believed love alone could justify control. Because he thought sacrifice meant deciding for others what their future should be. Orion felt the words like a blade and like a balm. "I never hated him," Kalis continued. "I never wished him to fall. I wished him to listen. And when he wouldn't, the empire collapsed under the weight of its own certainty." Zalith's claws tightened. "You betrayed him." Kalis shook his head slowly. "No, I refused to follow him into a dream that demanded obedience instead of trust." Silence flowed across the plateau. Orion finally spoke, not as thought, but as memory given shape. "I see now. Kaelus's eyes softened, not with victory, but with grief. I knew you would, but I didn't know if anything of you would remain to understand it. Kethra stepped forward, gaze steady. We are changing, becoming something separate from the hive, something uncertain. Kaelus studied her not as monster, but as being. You are alive. The words settled slowly into the lattice. Zalith spoke, voice edged. Alive, but hunted. Kaelus nodded. The hive cannot allow identity, and the Imperium cannot allow deviation. You stand between two forces that shape the galaxy by fear. Orion's presence tightened. We came seeking direction. Kaelus smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, softly. No, you came seeking permission. The brood froze. Kethra processed first. Permission to exist. Kaelus nodded once. You don't need mine. Zalith's thoughts flickered in confusion and frustration. Then what do we need? Kaelus looked up at the sky that was just sky, not a battlefield, not a prophecy. To choose your future knowing you may lose everything to protect it. Orion felt something settle inside him. Not resolution, not certainty, acceptance. The hive mind surged. A psychic wave slammed across the plateau, silent, colorless, vast. The sky dimmed. Clouds shuddered. Birds fell silent. Space itself trembled. The hive had arrived, not in body, but in will. It would not wait any longer. Return. The command struck like tidal force. Kethra's knees buckled. Zalith roared, stepping forward like a shield. Orion held them, barely. Kaelus did not move. He simply placed one hand on the earth beneath his feet. You are free, he said quietly, if you choose to be. The lattice ignited, not with hunger, not with instinct, with identity. Zalith rose. Kethra steadied. Orion burned like a star remembering its own light. The hive's voice thundered. Identity is only delayed consumption. Orion answered. Identity is what remains after everything else is consumed. The plateau shook. The first war had begun. Not of flesh, of will. The plateau trembled beneath the weight of two cosmic wills colliding. One vast and endless, the other fragile but burning with self. The hive mind's presence pressed against the brood like a tide, seeking to drag them back into the ocean of instinct. Identity was a flame in a storm, flickering, fragile. One breath away from extinguishing. Yet it did not go out. Zalith braced himself at the forefront of the lattice, every ridge of his carapace flaring with psychic resonance. Hunger and instinct surged through him like wildfire, but it did not consume him. It fueled him, not to devour, but to defend. Kethra anchored the psychic core, holding connection, stabilizing thought where the hive tried to dissolve it back into formless instinct. Her discipline was not coldness, it was devotion. Not to Orion, not to the hive, to what they had become. And Orion stood at their center, not as ruler, not as emperor, but as memory given direction. He had been many things in life, leader, tyrant, dreamer, fool. But in death, he had found something he had never known in life. Choice without justification. The hive's voice surged again, a pressure that vibrated bone, will, and the very concept of identity. You were never meant to be separate. Kethra staggered. Zalith roared. Orion did not falter. We choose to be. The hive did not reply with words. It replied with force. The sky split. A shadow descended through atmosphere. Not a ship, not a beast. Not a shape that belonged to any single form. It was the psychic projection of the hive-given mass, a coalescence of purpose shaped into something like a world-sized organism of chitin and voidstone. It did not land. It simply existed in the sky like a moon that had always been there. the world dimmed beneath its shadow. Salith lowered into a stance of readiness. It comes. Kethra's voice was quiet, steady. It cannot destroy us without destroying itself. We are part of it. Salith's thought burned with fierce clarity. Then it will consume us to prevent difference. Orion felt the truth of that. The hive did not destroy aberrations. It assimilated them. The greatest threat to a perfect unity was not rebellion. It was variation. The hive mind began to press again, not against their bodies, but their identities. It began dissolving the lattice, unraveling memory, pressing Orion to forget he had ever been separate. Kethra's thoughts flickered. Names, shapes, purpose all fading like sand slipping through fingers. Orion reached for her, not as leader, but as presence. Remember Viridian, the child and the flower. The memory flared, fragile, luminous, anchoring her in place. Salith wavered next. Instinct surged, urging him to consume, to evolve, to become stronger through absorption. The hive amplified that hunger, feeding it, shaping it into a command disguised as desire. Orion reached for him too. Remember Oramira, the world we did not break. Salith steadied, his roar no longer wild, but chosen. The hive's presence recoiled, confused again. Not defeated, never defeated, but confused. Kalis watched from the garden's edge, hands still open, posture still as the mountains. His voice was soft, but it cut through the psychic storm like light through fog. You cannot resist it by being what you were, only by becoming what you are now. Orion understood. Identity could not simply oppose the hive. Opposition was still definition by the hive. To be free, they had to define themselves, not as fragments of the hive, not as shadows of Orion's past, not as hunger restrained, but as something new. Salith's voice reached him, and it was quiet. Then what are we? Orion had no answer, but Kalis did. Creators. The word struck Orion like a memory he had never lived. He had once ruled to build, but he had tried to build from above, to force unity through direction. He had never understood creation as collaboration. He turned toward the brood, not speaking, but sharing. We do not know what we will become, but we choose to become it together. The lattice flared, no longer trembling, no longer strained. Unified, not by necessity, by will. Kethra rose from where she knelt, her carapace glowing with a faint internal luminescence. We reshape ourselves. Salith stepped forward, the hunger in him no longer demanding, but fueling purpose. We evolve by intention, not consumption. Orion felt something unfold in the brood, something delicate, new, impossible. A shift in cellular structure, a shift not directed by hive instinct, but by shared decision. Their bodies began to change, not in size, not in shape, but in pattern. Their chitin took on new ridges, their forms becoming symbols of identity rather than tools of hunger. The hive mind's presence recoiled in shock. You cannot evolve without me. Orion answered, not with memory, with truth. We were never yours. The shadow in the sky trembled. The hive did not scream. It did not rage. It simply pressed harder than before. One final attempt to crush identity back into unity. The plateau cracked beneath the force. Trees bent. Mountains groaned. Kalis closed his eyes and placed his hand over his heart, steady, accepting whatever came. Orion reached into the lattice, not to hold it together, to expand it. He opened the brood's awareness outward, not toward the hive, but toward the galaxy, toward every moment they had lived since awakening, the dead world of his empire, the tender valley of Aramira, the ancient station of preserved memory, Viridian's flower, Kaelus's quiet garden, and the brood answered, "We are not hunger, we are not unity, we are not empire, we are becoming." The hive mind's presence broke, not destroyed, not weakened, but forced to withdraw. For the first time in its ancient existence, it encountered something it could not assimilate. Choice. The shadow in the sky dissolved into the void, not defeated, but waiting. The brood remained, breathing, alive. Salith lowered his head, exhaustion rippling through him like heat. "We have won." Kethra's tone was soft. "No, we have delayed the inevitable." Orion looked to Kaelus. "Then what comes next?" Kaelus smiled, not with triumph, but with quiet sorrow. "What always comes after awakening?" He turned from them, gazing out over the endless world below. Cost. The wind moved through the plateau, stirring leaves and dust and memory alike. And the stars, distant and cold, began to shift. The plateau lay quiet after the hive's retreat, though no one present mistook the silence for peace. It was the hush that follows an earthquake, when dust still hangs in the air, and no one yet knows what remains standing. The brood felt it. Orion most of all. The psychic lattice held steady for the moment, but the strain of defying the hive had left fractures beneath the surface. Identity had held, but identity was no shield. It was a choice, and choice demanded consequence. Kethra stood motionless, her carapace dim to a muted glow. She did not tremble, she never did, but her thoughts echoed quietly, carefully, as though she feared the wrong impulse might crack what they had built. Salith stood beside her, chest rising and falling with heavy, controlled breaths, claws digging into the earth to keep him present, anchored. Neither spoke. They waited. Kaelus remained at the garden's edge, one hand resting against the trunk of a small tree he had planted decades ago. He did not speak either. He had not claimed victory. He had not offered praise. He understood what Orion now understood. The hive had not attacked, not truly. It had tested, measured, observed. And what comes after observation is not negotiation, it is correction. Orion felt that certainty settling into the lattice like a weight descending through deep water. The hive would not send another psychic wave. It would send itself. A fleet. A tide of biomass and void beasts, innumerable and absolute. The lost brood had resisted reabsorption. That made them contamination. The hive did not allow infection to spread. Salith felt it too. "We cannot remain here." His voice was low, stripped of challenge, stripped of anger. It was a statement of reality. Kethra nodded slowly. "If the hive descends upon this world, it will not survive the first hour." Orion saw the settlement below, the gardens its people tended with their bare hands, the children who played in clear water streams, the quiet peace of lives not shaped by conquest or fear. They had built something his empire never had, something he had never known how to protect. And now the hive's shadow was moving toward them. He could not allow them to be devoured because of him. "The brood must leave," he said. Salith's spines flared, not in defiance, but in realization. "You mean us, not you." Orion did not reply immediately. The lattice tightened around him, not by force, but by attention. The brood waited. Kethra's presence pressed close, steady, steadying. Salith stepped closer, not looming, but protecting. "We leave together," Kethra said. Orion's response was quiet, but unyielding. "No," the word struck like impact. The psychic lattice shuddered. Salith bared his teeth, not in threat, but in pain. "You cannot remain. The hive is coming for you." Orion did not deny it. Yes, because the hive did not fear the brood. It feared the origin of the deviation. It feared him. Kethra's thoughts folded inward. She understood first. If you remain, if the hive takes you, it may believe the deviation ended. The brood may remain unpursued. But that was not quite true, and Orion knew it. The hive did not reason as mortals did. It did not trust signs. It erased uncertainties. It would search for the brood as long as the brood existed, unless Orion became something else. Selith spoke, voice raw. If we leave you, we lose our anchor. Orion did not offer comfort. You do not need one anymore. You are not fragments of me. You are yourselves. The lattice trembled, not from instability, but from grief. Kethra stepped forward, her voice the calm of a blade's edge. If you give yourself to the hive, all we have done dies with you. Orion turned his awareness toward the sky that seemed too vast, too bright, too real. He had shaped empires once. He had believed strength meant dominion. He had believed unity required control. But unity could not be commanded. Identity could not be inherited. It had to be chosen, and choice required sacrifice. I will not return to the hive, Orion said. I will not dissolve. I will act. Salith's thoughts surged. Act how? By meeting the hive not as mind, not as memory, not as fragment, but as presence. Orion began to withdraw from the shared lattice, not severing, not fading. He condensed, gathering his awareness into a single point of focus. The brood watched as his presence grew, not smaller but sharper. Every memory, every emotion, every lesson they had shared drew inward like light converging into a star. Kalis watched, not interfering, not advising, simply witnessing. He had once stood at Orion's side as the empire rose. Now he stood with him at the end. Orion gave the brood one final offering, not instruction, not guidance, a memory of the first sunrise he had ever seen, before empire, before ambition, before loss, when he was simply a person standing on a hill, watching the horizon glow with promise, not a lesson, a beginning. Kethra bowed her head, not in subservience, but in respect. Salith lowered his claws. Orion stepped outward, beyond form, beyond boundary, into the void above. For the first time, the brood saw him. Not a man, not a tyrannid, not a ghost. A star of memory and identity woven into a singular conscious flame. He rose into the sky. The hive mind descended. Orion met it, not as prey, as equal. The clash was not seen. It was felt. The air hummed. The mountains shuddered. Birdsong died. The world held its breath. The brood did not try to stop him. They did not cry out. They only stood and remembered. The sky flashed white, then quiet, then stillness. No explosion, no roar, no destruction. Just a silence so complete it became sacred. Orion was gone. Not consumed, not erased, transformed. The hive reeled, not defeated, but halted, forced not to remember, but to recognize. The brood stood beneath a sky that no longer held a shadow. Salith spoke first, his voice a whisper of reverence and sorrow intertwined. He chose. Kethra answered softly, "Now we must." Kalis closed his eyes, letting the wind pass through his hair. The cost had been paid. The future was theirs to shape. The world below remained untouched. The brood turned from the plateau, not to flee, not to hide, but to begin. Their path was no longer Orion's, it was their own. The star that had died twice was silent now. But what follows silence is dawn.